And we're live. Welcome, folks, to our webinar on digital organization presented by Promega. We'll be getting started at the top of the hour, and we'll be with you real soon. Thanks, and please mute your microphones while we wait. Hello, folks, and welcome to Kaizen Institute's webinar on digital organization. We'll be starting up in about 10 minutes at the top of the hour. Please mute your microphones, and we'll be with you right away. Thank you. Hello, folks, and welcome to Kaizen Institute's webinar on digital organization, sponsored by Promega. We're going to be starting up in about 6 minutes. So until then, I invite you to be patient, and we will be right with you. Hello, folks, and welcome to Kaizen Institute's webinar on digital organization. We will be starting up in about 3 minutes at the top of the hour. Until then, I invite you to be patient, and we will be with you real soon. Hello, folks, and welcome to our webinar on digital organization presented by Kaizen Institute and sponsored by our friends over at Promega. I'm your host, Chuck Cherry, and it's my pleasure to introduce Mike Mickelwright, who will be leading us through our presentation today. Mike is the Kaizen Director of Operations for the US and has over 30 years of experience in leadership of Kaizen lean and quality groups. He's also the author of 2 books, Out of Another Bleeping Crisis and Lean ISO 9001. Our webinar agenda includes a question and answer period following the presentation, but at any point along the presentation, if you want to ask a question or put in a concern, you're welcome to use the live event Q&A that should appear on your screen if you hit the little icon for it. And you can ask a question at any time, but we will be opening up for questions at the end of the presentation. We'd also love to hear you. You will get a link following the presentation to a survey. And if you respond to that survey, you'll also get a certificate of having attended the webinar. So we'd love to hear from you after the webinar is over. So with no further ado, I'll turn this over to Mike Mickelwright. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Hello, everyone. Again, this is Mike Mickelwright with the Kaizen Institute. I am calling in from sunny Chicago today, and I welcome you all once again to our webinar. This one is entitled Digital 5S Organization KAIZEN Event. And so let me explain real briefly about that. So by digital, we really mean 2 different parts, virtual and electronic. So we're taking the 5S tool that so many of us know about and applying it to the electronic world, the files and folders and our network and so forth. And then we're also talking about doing this virtually, since so many of us are working at home. This is an event that can be done from the confines of your bedroom, of your office, of your basement, of your kitchen, and done so very effectively. So the point is that we want to show you this material, provide this 1-hour webinar to you, because there is a very exciting opportunity here, and it's a way to keep up that Kaizen spirit that may have dwindled a bit as we go through the crisis that we're going through. It's very important to keep the culture of continuous improvement alive and the culture of continuous improvement alive. And this is one way to do it. This is not just a way to do it, but it's also a way that we can get some really great benefits. So many of you throughout the years have seen, and you work in an environment, a digital environment, in which there is a cluster of files and folders, and there's a lot of inefficiencies and lack of productivity in the office workers, because we just deal with it. We deal with the organization or the lack of organization of our files and folder structure. And so therefore there is no structure, and it really does affect office productivity and efficiency. So I'm challenging you. This is a big challenge here, is to look for these opportunities to treat this as a Kaizen event, an electronic virtual Kaizen event. Focus on electronic files and folders and your network. There's a real opportunity to gain benefits and to keep the spirit of Kaizen alive. So with that said, what we would like to do, of course, is to thank our sponsor. Our sponsor is, once again, Promega. And Promega is, of course, a leader in providing innovative solutions and technical support to the life sciences industry, including reagents and instruments used in COVID-19 testing. Since January of this year, Promega has provided enough amplification reagents and enzymes to enable testing for an estimated 52.5 million samples for SARS-CoV-2 worldwide. Now, just a couple of weeks ago, when Promega was a sponsor of one of our webinars, they were at 25 million. So since that time, they've doubled the amount of samples that they're providing. So they're doing obviously a great service to all of us, and we hear about this in the news all the time. Well, here's a company that is doing a tremendous amount of work to help us to identify people with the virus, and so that we can eventually get back to our normal lives. Just a couple other facts from Promega. They do provide the components for over 26 COVID-19 test kits. I didn't even realize that there were that many, but over 26 different types of test kits. And they also provide the sample preparation tools Well, as of the end of March, just 3 weeks ago, they were providing it to over 240 labs worldwide. Today, it's over 500 labs worldwide. So they're doing a tremendous amount of work. Meanwhile, they also were one of the first companies, or the first company, to go through their ISO 9001 and ISO 13485 recertification assessments. Chuck, do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Mike.
Okay, so we had a little glitch here. I think we're okay. Yes, and so they have become they did it all electronically. They became recertified to 9001 and 1345 just recently. Is the first time that someone went through a certification audit, a surveillance audit done virtually. So they're at the forefront of many things. One of the things that Promega did also wanted to share with everyone is I've worked with Promega for a number of years on a lot of different events. They're a fantastic company to work with, very open-minded, very progressive, and they really want to get rid of the waste in their organization. So we've worked on many different events, and one of them was a water spider Project KAIZEN event, and where they improved the overall processing efficiency by 28% by using water spiders in their kit packaging area. They maintained these standards and maintained the protocol as they were tripling production for their reagents and kit packages. So a fantastic story. So Promega, thank you. And so everyone knows, this webinar is brought to you by Promega. They're enabling this to happen free of charge. So now we get into our, well, we're almost going to get into our webinar. One quick reminder, based on feedback that we received from some of our customers for the desire to have a certificate, we're offering a certificate of attendance or completion and attendance for this webinar. So you will get information sent to you within the next 24 hours regarding a survey. If you complete that survey, we'll also make sure that you have a certificate of attendance. Now, what is the purpose? Let's set the stage. What is the purpose? Why are we doing this? Why do I challenge you on this opportunity? So years ago, Chevron had done a study, and this kind of hit me on the side of the head. It said during their survey, they said digital files that were stored on their servers were growing at a rate of 60% a year. Now, this goes back a number of years, so it could be even worse today, or much more so today. And of course, this is having negative effects in the business. As such, about almost 1 hour per day of a typical or average transactional employee, office employee, was spending time on searching for information, critical information. Now, I know many of us, think in terms of the production environment and the physical world, and we talk about efficiencies and so forth, and we can see that we really want to do something to improve that, but we never look into this electronic world. We never look over and go to the Gemba at this
Okay, it looks like we're having a little difficulty on Mike's end. We'll just wait a few seconds here and see if Mike refines the connection. If not, I will be taking this over.
Hey, come back.
Yep, you can come back, Mike.
Okay, I will, let me share my screen again.
All right.
Okay, can you see my screen?
We can, but it's there. You're in presentation mode now, Mike.
All right, very good.
Good to go.
So, I don't know where I left off, where I got cut out, but anyway, we are talking about with the Chevron study, an average of nearly 1 hour per employee's time, transactional employee's time, office employee's time is spent searching for critical information. So that's a lot, that's 12% of someone's day. And so oftentimes, we look in terms of looking in the physical world at productivity and efficiency. And we look at the potential of a 12% gain or even half of that as being immense and hugely productive. It's an opportunity. But we hardly ever look into the office world and the transactional world. We don't look over people's shoulders at the processing and what they do when they're searching for files and folders and programs and manipulating data and going from one program to another program and searching and searching. So there's a huge opportunity here. So this is not just a challenge just to say, hey, do a Kaizen event at home, a virtual Kaizen event at home, but this is where we can make some huge gains, and you can all make some huge gains. And if desired, we can also help you with that with our vast experience in doing this. So what we're going to review today is a very quick daily Kaizen overview, and then we have to set the stage. We have to set the stage to understand, okay, yes, we know about waste. Many of you know about the waste, and some of you don't, so we need to also make sure that we're all on the same page. But now we have to talk about waste, not just the physical waste that we're used to, but also the electronic waste. And that will lead into electronic 5S. And then we'll talk about virtual electronic 5S event. So setting up an event to do this. And then there's two different types of events that we'll talk about. And I've got some examples, many different examples towards the end of this webinar on different types of events. And one is going to be on 5S'ing data entry and workflows and procedures. And using it on the guts of either documents or data entry screens in SAP or some other platform, and looking at those and making sure that we have a good system, a good structure that flows. But then also going through a case study, and the case study is more about files and folders, and a 5S event on files and folders, reorganizing, setting them correctly. And then at the very end, I've got some additional best practices from a number of different organizations that you can learn from. So here's a whole bunch of things here. Take some notes. You will have access to this recording. We'll give you that information. We also have a YouTube channel, so you can go back on here because there's going to be a lot of little tidbits of information that you might want to come back and revisit and make sure that you got and you captured. So we'll start off with the overview, Daily Kaizen overview. As some of you know who have worked with us, we have a Kaizen change model. And so it looks like this. And so our overall transformation is at the top of this pyramid, this house, if you will. And so there's so many different elements to make sure that it's a holistic Kaizen transformation. So on the right side, I won't go through that. That's Leaders Kaizen, extremely important, but it's not the focus of what we're talking about. This has to do with proper Gemba walks and Kamishibai, process audits and leadership participation in Kaizen events and Hoshin Kanri or strategic policy deployment. Really important stuff, but not the focus of what we're doing today. On the left side, we have Daily Kaizen, and this is where 5S or workplace organization fits in technically. And so we have different levels. We have 4 different levels in Daily Kaizen. One of the levels I talked about last week in a webinar, which was Daily Kaizen team organization, level 1. And this one is primarily about workplace organization, which is very much related to 5S and developing those behaviors so that we have a good workplace organization and we can work efficiently. But then right smack in the middle there is Breakthrough Kaizen. And the reason Breakthrough Kaizen, this is where we're going to do our value stream mapping and our Kaizen events, and we're going to make monster changes in that we're going to develop big improvement in quality and productivity, et cetera, et cetera. But 5S can also fit into Breakthrough Kaizen. So it kind of fits into both. It's the Daily Kaizen, the improvements that we make constantly and we maintain the system day to day, but it also can fit into Breakthrough Kaizen. That's kind of what we're talking about today. It's like, oh, we have the possibility of increasing office productivity by X percent, 6%, 7%, 8%, whatever that might be. This is a huge opportunity, and so it can be under Breakthrough Kaizen as well. And so this is what if we look at this in terms of a quality or efficiency on the vertical axis, this is what we want to do. We want to obviously keep making improvements. And so we have steep slopes and then we have gentle slopes, a steep slope and a gentle slope. And the steep slopes is when we're doing those events, and we get and we're focusing with a team on making huge improvements in productivity and quality and efficiencies and throughput. And so that's where we make those big changes. But then daily Kaizen comes in. That's where we have the gentle slope, and we maintain those improvements. But we still continue to make more improvements. And we can do this through 5S, the 5S system. And that's our progression, but we never go backwards. We're always moving up in the spirit of continuous improvement. And so here you have on this page, on the left-hand side, again, daily Kaizen, and you see where what we're talking about fits into number 2, step 2 or level 2, workplace organization. And so that's where we are in the progress of daily Kaizen. Fits into workplace organization 5S, making sure that workplace is suitable. It allows employees to succeed efficiently and with high quality. Once again, it's laid out a little bit different here. This is more of a roadmap, but you have your level 1s and your level 2, and level 2 is our focus of today, where we implement maintain 5S. We build standards. We build standards for information and data management. We make sure that we're accomplishing those standards and following those standards and making improvements to those standards. And then we also have leader standard work for process confirmation, or like an assessment system, and making sure that leaders are ensuring that whatever we've laid out from an electronic folder organization, file organization, whatever that standard is, that we adhere to that. And so that's part of our leader standard work. So that's where we are. So we're at level 2, and that's our focus. So again, in order to build into this, there's a huge relationship between the waste that we're used to seeing, and many of us have different acronyms within our organizations that we use for the 7 wastes. So we're going to go through the 7 wastes quickly. I don't want to assume that people don't know about the 7 wastes, but then we'll also go through it from an electronic standpoint, a digital standpoint, and what does this mean digitally, because we're so used to the physical waste. Okay, so what we have here is what we refer to as the 7 digital wastes. Now, in parentheses at the end of each of these is the typical word that you might be used to when you hear about the 7 wastes. So I didn't want to confuse anyone. So where it says the first one, excess information or data, when you're relating this back to your list of 7 wastes, what are we talking about? We're talking about inventory. The inventory just happens to be electronic documents and files and folders, etc. So it's piles. They're still piles. They're just in a different format. We have information and data transportation, and of course that's still transportation. It's just digital transportation. When we send something, when we copy someone on an email and we send documents, etc., that's transportation. It's just a different type of transportation. We have information and data weighting. That can be related to overproduction. We've produced too much data, and it's sitting in someone's inbox. It's sitting, there's a report that's sitting in some repository that no one's looking at. Well, that's like overproduction. It's like, why did we produce that? And then, of course, we have motion. And motion you can think of in terms of searching, clicks of the mouse, people waiting, overprocessing, and errors. Okay, so those are our 7 digital wastes. Now, I have 1 page for each of those so that we can, I'm sorry, 2 pages for each of those so we can understand how this relates to us digitally. So the first one, excess information and data. Too much information. Getting information or producing information or data before it's needed is another example. And also excessively long reports. I deal with organizations that develop these reports that are extremely long, and they know that the users are not reading the whole thing. So that's excess information and data that's just not necessary. We got transfer of information and data. That's the transportation, if you will. So that might be information transfer or transporting information between processes. Could be excessive copying, which we all do because it's so easy to do, right? So we all seem to do that. And long file paths or long steps, paths to get to certain files or folders. We wait on information and data. That's kind of like overproduction. So we might have unused, obsolete data, reports, lots of work in progress that are just kind of sitting there and we're waiting for information to be input into it. That's still considered to be waste because it's waiting. It's overproduction at that point in time. Unnecessary reports, full inboxes, those are all different types of examples. Then we have movement of information and data, people looking for information and data, the transportation between departments, lots of excess movements. And of course, as I said before, the searching, the number of times you click a mouse is waste. And that adds up over time because we do this constantly throughout the day. People waiting, it could be for authorizations, equipment repair, software repair, bugs to be repaired, slow response times, waiting for logins. You guys were waiting for me a little while ago. Do I need to bring that up? But you were waiting for me because we had a glitch apparently. Overprocessing. Well, we got long, time-consuming processes that we're all used to. Lots of very poor organization, the way we lay things out, our programs, our hardware, the connectedness between programs or the lack of connectedness. So there's a lot of overprocessing, redundant data entry, tasks that are required that just don't meet the customer's needs, but we've never questioned it. Manual processes. I have one client that their entire, so much of their focus and their objectives for the year is to reduce manual processes, and there's so much opportunity. So those are all examples. And of course we have errors, which is like defects. And you know what those are: bad documents, inaccurate documents, wrong file formats, lack of information given to a specific person that needed some information. So those are our wastes, right? So we got all these wastes, and so we need to relate this in the digital world. And so there's a relationship to 5S, and some people don't understand that relationship. Is that, you know, when we go through 5S, and it's all about eliminating those 7 ways for the most part, right? I mean, we have lots of issues. Why do we want to 5S in the electronic and the digital world? Well, we have a lot of cloud and memory usage rates that are very low. The space that's available might be lower than expected. We tend to think that it's an unlimited supply of memory that we have, but it does cost in many different ways, not just financially, but in the amount of time that we spent searching for documents and files and folders. So we want to do it because of that. Maybe one of the biggest reasons we want to do 5S digitally is because this sheer searching time. So going back to that Chevron study that I talked about in the very beginning, 12% or 1 hour out of a person's day is spent searching for stuff, files, folders, programs, etc. This is probably one of the biggest reasons why we want to do 5S in the digital world. Time-consuming processes, just looking at the process and looking at how do we actually spend our time? How much time is spent being weighted, downloading data, uploading data, information, putting reports together, waiting for programs, waiting for people. There's a lot of time-consuming processes, and we should be looking at those and seeing how can we make this much more efficient and effective. And of course, we do have the hardware side, the damaged equipment, but we also have corrupted files and folders, corrupted programs. So we want to do 5S because of that reason too as well, and make sure that we have a system of maintenance or sustaining, which is the 5th S. Okay, so as some of you know, 5S is a very simple tool. It's a fun tool. Everyone likes it. It's probably the one tool that most people understand. Some people think it's just about housekeeping, and no, it's not. I mean, sure, housekeeping is a benefit, but it's not just about that. It is about productivity. It is about office productivity, and it's a very simple little process, and it's a lot of fun to do. And so we go through the process, 5 steps of sort, setting in order, shining, standardizing, and sustaining. And this can be done in the physical world, which many of you are used to, but it can be done just as well. And have great positive results in the digital world as well. Now, again, what's the relationship between these 5 S's and the 7 wastes? Well, just as an example, when we sort, what are we sorting out? We're sorting out defects or errors. We're sorting out excess inventory or data or information. We're sorting out lengthy documents and removing the things that people are not reading and not using and not analyzing. And so all of those wastes our sort is related to many of those wastes. A set and order, what is that related to? Well, set and order is related to driving down transportation, driving down motion, so that we put things in a certain place and where it's easy to get to, point of view storage, so that we can get to it very quickly and very easily, and we don't have that excess transportation and motion. So again, we'll go through the 5 S's, and then we'll get into our examples or our case studies. But we want to go through the 5 S's again from a different aspect, looking at it from an electronic standpoint this time. So once again, regardless of what the focus is in sort, we are always thinking in terms of when in doubt, move it out. So if you're not sure, move it out. But we want to define what's necessary, identify also what is not necessary, and then free the workplace of what is not necessary. So our workplace, for many of us, and especially with regard to this webinar, is right here in front of us. This is our workplace. Everything that we see on our desktop and our network, that's what we're referring to. So we want to eliminate the clutter, just like we do in the physical world. We want to screen out the files and folders and programs, and make sure that we're really looking at just those things that we use frequently, and taking that into consideration. What do we use? What do we not use? What is obsolete? What just doesn't belong? And just like we do in the physical world, we can red tag. And I'll show you an example of that in the case study. But we eliminate our unnecessary items, but we might have that holding area just to make sure. And that holding area is a red tag folder. And we might put stuff in there and let it sit there for 2 weeks or a month, but then clean it out. But what we're really trying to see is anyone referring to these documents that are in this red tag folder? If we're not, yeah, maybe it really should be sorted out. Maybe they're just not used. Maybe they're not necessary. But we want to have that holding area for a while, and we do that through sort, and we can do that in the digital world as well. As we sort, what we might see is something like this on our desktop, the before and the after, and once we've organized, once we've gone through the entire process, but we've also sorted out those documents that just don't need to be on our desktop because we never open them. The second S is set in order. The nice little quote that we use is a place for everything and everything in its place. This has to do with materials and equipment that should be stored, according to frequency, according to use, according to weight and size. Okay, that's the physical world. But what about in the electronic world? Well, we want files and folders and programs that should be organized in order to reduce the number of clicks, overall number of clicks and the search time. And so we think about, well, so there's a strong relationship there. And we need to have that mentality, that thinking that, yeah, set in order our documents so that the ones that we use a lot, we should be able to get through very quickly. And the ones that we don't use that often, we don't have to concern ourselves with those as much. But it should make sense for the types of documents and files and folders and programs that we're using. So in set in order, we want to set the best folder structure. We're going to organize files and folders accordingly. Our Outlook folders that we have in our Outlook might have the exact same names and as our PC folder. So if we move from one to the other, we can do so easily, and it makes sense. So there's a relationship between those. Some of my clients have also made sure that their electronic folders marry up properly with their physical folders, and they're the same color. Or they're the same designation, same file names and so forth, so that there's that relationship between the two. Using shortcuts, of course, as many of us know about shortcuts, and we use those, but they can always be used much more extensively. And we want to make sure that we're looking at the number of overall folders versus the number of clicks. I mean, obviously, the more folders we have, the less number of clicks, so you're trading off one waste for another. So we have to think about what makes the most sense when we're setting an order. This is just another example of someone's desktop before and after setting an order. And on the right-hand side, you see the after, and maybe we organize by, we have a program area on our desktop, or we have active files on our desktop, or we have shortcuts on our desktop that are organized in such a way. Another example before and after, just a whole list of folders on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, there's some kind of organization by standard folder types of folder designations. In the middle there, I've got another example of subfolders. Some people have used like subfolders of projects, and they'll have a subfolder for every single project which is working, reference documents in the archive folder. So these are just different ideas and thoughts of what you can do to cut out some of that lack of productivity in the office. Shine. We want to clean and inspect the workplace, looking at sources of contamination, restoring back to original conditions, and visually identifying problems. So we want to keep everything swept and clean. Now, that, of course, can be related to our PCs, our laptops, and any other digital equipment that we use. And so it's very applicable. But we also want to make sure that we understand, what does Shine mean to our files and folders? What do dirty files and folders look like? And how do we make sure that we don't have those? So I'm going to kind of go through some examples of that too coming up, about making sure that we're shining our files and folders, and what does that actually mean? Standardize is the fourth S. We want to have visual standards. So on the next page, you're going to see some examples of what you see on this page. Some examples of visual standards in the digital world. Establish rules for use, like maybe 1-point lessons. Some of you are used to 1-point lessons. I'll show you an example of that. Color codings and symbols for the use of documents and equipment. Maintaining and defining standards for maintenance, and frequency of, how do we make sure that there's responsibility identified and frequency for updating the standards and making sure that those are sustained. So on the right-hand side, you see some examples of standards. Maybe it's a folder structure that we standardize in many of our different folders. Maybe it's desktop organization. Maybe we ask people to standardize on their desktops. I had an organization that I worked with once who they had 4 different customer order people, and the team leader would help them and train them, and by going to their cubicle and looking at their laptop. But every time she trained them, she wanted to see kind of a standard desktop, so that she knew exactly where the files and folders were, so the training process went well and expediently. So of the 4 or 5 people that she had reporting to them, they all had standard desktops because it became kind of a shared space in a way. You also have an example of equipment 1-point lesson, or OPL, on the upper right-hand corner, and software standardization. So standardized fits in quite nicely to the digital world, as we suspected. Sustain is the 5th S. Of course, we have our standards. We got to make sure that we use them. So we got to practice them, and we got to improve upon them. We should have audits of some sort to make sure that we're periodically ensuring that they're working and they're healthy and they're proper. And we have the maintenance and improvement of the workplace organization should always be continuous. So we need to have that sustaining process in place to make sure it's continuous and we're always improving, and it's not just status quo, because there's so many times that we'll do that I've been involved in where we'll do a virtual electronic 5S Kaizen event or a digital Kaizen event, and it changes almost immediately, and that's okay. That's okay. What's going to make it change? The sustaining process, because as we sustain, we say, oh wow, we're not adhering to the standard. Well, why not? Well, maybe the standard's not the best. Maybe there is a better way, and so we improve the standard. And so that's just part of the continuous improvement process. So sustaining means knowing those standards, applying them every day, follow-up audits, improving upon the standards constantly. So there you have it. So there you have. So what did we do? We painted the big picture. We talked about the waste, the 7 wastes. In the electronic digital world, and then we went to the 5S step-by-step process. Now we can use 5S as an event. So what's an event? It's a chunk of time that we're going to use to dedicate to this, and we can do this virtually. You can get a team of people. Say, here's our focus. This is what we're going to do. We're going to be looking at this folder or file structure, or we're going to be looking at these processes. And we're going to look at all the documents that we use in these processes, and we're going to set them in order. We're going to make our workplace well organized, and we're going to do it through an event. And an event might look something like this. So on the left-hand side, you got miscellaneous events that we do in the Kaizen Institute. So you have on the left-hand side, TFM, Total Flow Management, or TSM, Total Service Management, TQM, which is something that I'll be reviewing or going over a webinar on this Thursday, which is about the vision of zero defects is still alive, which is related to TQM. IDM, innovation and development management, that whole process, and TPM, total productive maintenance. So we can have Kaizen events focused around those areas, depending on what the need is, depending on what the strategic objectives of the company are. So we do that. Now, a subset of that might be, and it might be part of TFM, total flow management, where the flow, our electronic flow of information and data or processes is not really good. And so we want to have an event that is focused on electronic 5S. And so it might look like what you see right there in the middle, where there's some preparation work that has to be done. You always want to have some preparation work so that the event comes off well. And then the event itself might be 1 to 3 days. In some cases, it might be a little bit more, even 4 days. This is the electronic digital 5S event that we actually do. And then there would be follow-up to see how we're doing. It's part of that old PDCA cycle, right? We want to do some follow-up to check on the results and act upon it and see if we want to spread this thing out even further. So it's a great idea to have a virtual Kaizen event on 5S of your digital files. Now, what might be some of those steps? Well, here's some of those steps. I wouldn't say it's an all-inclusive list here, but here's some of your steps that would happen during this event. And all of these take an amount of time. And we do this in the workshop setting, and maybe we break up into subgroups or small teams. And it's all about setting that focus on driving efficiency improvements. So, of course, we want to sort through all the necessary and unnecessary files and shortcuts, but we have to define what's unnecessary and what gives us that idea of what's unnecessary. You know, maybe it's a file that hasn't been opened by anybody in 2 months. That might be an indication no one's using it. Or maybe it hasn't been updated or revised in 3 months or a year or whatever. Those are indicators. We want to get an idea of what is unnecessary and what is necessary. And so you might create that red tag folder, start moving documents and folders over into that red tag folder, which is that holding area, or that, sometimes I like to call it purgatory. So it's kind of being held there for a while. And then we got our third step, which is define that structure. What is that extra structure of shared files? What's that going to look like? How is it best done for our process, whatever the process of focus is? Because process is very important. We don't want to organize by type of document, and I'll talk about that in the case study, but we want to organize by what's best for our process and what files do we use when and where. And then we want to, of course, make sure that the files are not corrupted and the shortcuts do work, and make sure we have a system to make sure that those are maintained. We want to develop a folder structure and the nomenclature for files. How do you find documents very quickly? What's that file name structure look like? That's most important to everyone. It makes it easy for people to find things, because that's part of set and order, right? That's specifically setting in order a file name structure so it's easy to find. And then we develop our routines to keep that discipline, which comes into the shine process, the standardized process, and sustaining. Okay, so that's a suggestion, is don't just do 5S, but treat it as a real event. And of course, we're always available to help you out if necessary. But we're providing this information so that you can go ahead and try it. And it's a great idea, and I've seen great success stories. So now, when you're doing an event, I kind of look at, well, there's multiple different types of events, but there's two that I'll talk about right now. This one first. And this is getting into the guts of the document, or the data entry screen, or the workflows, or the procedures, and looking at the guts of those things, and trying to really look at, what do we use here? What is worthwhile? What is not necessary? And start laying out that structure. Don't just accept what we're given, but really try to understand what is used, what is read, what is necessary, and what is not necessary within the workflows, within the data entry screens, within procedures. So here's an example. Now, 10 years ago, I wrote a book. It's called Lean ISO 9001, and it touched on some of this. It was about leaning out documents, procedures and work instructions and standards, because people write these immense documents that defeat the whole purpose, and they're repetitive, they're redundant. That was just repetitive and redundant, wasn't it? Yes, it was. Anyway, and so people don't read them, and so it defeats the purpose. So here's like a quick little snapshot of what was an 8-page procedure, and you can see my sorting. This is an example of redlining, red folder sorting, where I just redlined almost the entire page. This went from an 8-page document, this is only one of the pages, of course, down to a 2-page document. And by getting rid of all the extraneous stuff that was necessary. The responsibility section that was crossed off, it was not necessary because it's right in the procedure. It was redundant. The references was not necessary because it's right in the procedure. So it was all redundant stuff that was just not necessary. So that's something that can be done. Now, what about someone working in whatever it is, SAP or some other platform, some other MRP system? A lot of times we just live with what we have. We live with what we're given. We live with the standard, and we don't seek to change. And so with some companies, we've done things like this, where we look at each screen individually, and we go through step by step by step and say, what do you fill in, or what don't you fill in? What's necessary, what's not necessary? So this is an example of red tagging or redlining a screen, data entry screen. And you can see some notes on the right side. It says sort, remove the fields that are never used to search, remove exact match features that are never used, remove wording that's not needed. So there's just an awful lot. And look at this doc, and look at that page. Now, if a person is going through, let's say 10 different screens, 10 different data entry screens to do their work, to do a process, and yet you have a screen like this where 3/4 of it is not even used. Maybe we can consolidate, get rid of the stuff, sort out the stuff that's not necessary, and then set in order, and we can go from 10 screens down to 1 or 2 screens. This is huge for efficiency. This is huge for not making errors. And this is all possible to do with a simple little 5S Kaizen event. This same company, we printed out the screenshots of each of the different pages and put them up on a wall, and then looked at each one of them and looked at what was used and not used, and then reconfigured and moved things around and say, hey, we can combine these different data entry screens, these 4 into 1 screen, and so forth. And so it was an event that we used in order to consolidate and bring it down to just what was necessary for that team. And they end up coming up with something. This is more of a future state, or what they changed to. This was the consolidation of a few different pages, and so they brought it down into this, and they recorded some notes and so forth. So this is a huge opportunity. The procedures, the standards, the work instructions, the data entry screens, the workflows, all of these can be possible focus areas to improve office efficiency. Okay, so got another case study, and on this particular case study, we are going to look at files and folder organization within a company's network. So started off by saying, okay, what's the scope of the event? We identified the scope as a certain process. We did the Gemba walk, or sit, in this case, the Gemba sit, where we actually watched someone doing the work, processing like they normally do, whatever it was. In this particular case, it was customer order entry. And so watch that person for quite some time to understand and see how they move around, and the searching that they do, and the opening and the closing of files and folders and so forth. And so we did that, and we observed the waste. The funny thing is about folders, and I think this is really important. Look at your own folders and how you organize data and information. It's no different than the physical world. I mean, what we've done before is we put our equipment in silos. We put all the lathes over there, all the paint equipment over there, all the assembly over there, and we do it with people. Put all the engineers in that order, in that corner, put all the salespeople in this corner, put all the customer service people in this corner. It's all organized by types. We do the same thing with documents, files and folders. We put them by types. Put all your procedures here, your standards here, your Kamishibai audits over here. We do it by type, but type is not process. We want to organize things by process. What makes our process most efficient, most productive? And so we want to get rid of that batch mentality of putting like things together and focus in on process. So in this particular case study, this was order entry. This is an example. You see that right down the middle there are all their folders for customer service manual number 2. Lots of different folders. It says AA, work instructions, angio screens, customer service, and these are all by types. Way down at the very bottom it says procedures, VA procedures. So they organized everything by types, and it was causing a lot of stress, not a lot of stress, well, unknowingly a lot of stress, but it was causing a lot of mistakes and errors and long processes. So we started off the process. You see in the lower left-hand corner, I circled it. It says red tag. We created a red tag folder, and then we went through each of the different folders, and I came up with a set of criteria and said, what is going to go into the red tag folder? If we haven't read it, if no one's opened it in a month, put it in the red tag folder. If it hasn't been revised in 6 months, we put it in the red tag folder. We made up criteria like that. This is what you would have to do as well, whatever makes sense for you. Now I'm going to pretend to open up, click on AA work instructions, and you'll see this. And under AA work instructions, you have a whole bunch of documents, right? And so the interesting is you see different types of documents, PDFs, Word documents, but then you see kind of an interesting numbering system. It's not consistent. It's not set in order. And so we want to set in order. Where you see all those PDFs where it says AA 7.2.1-004, that means nothing to anybody except for one person. It meant something to the document control person. That's it. But to everyone else, it didn't mean anything. So it was hard to find stuff. It was hard to see documents. It was hard to find out where they were and search for them because of those numbers and letters at the very beginning. So when we're doing set in order, we want to think about file names. What is that right file name structure? And then arrange by process. And so they did both of these things. And they, on the left-hand side, they rearranged. So I'm going to go back up a little bit. So what we had was this, and they rearranged this to this on the left-hand side. And they organized it by product type, so a gearbox or a motor for the most part. And then when you click open gearbox, what you see is on the right side, and you don't see numbers and letters, but you see an alphabetical listing for everything that's related to a gearbox, an order entry of a gearbox. It doesn't matter what type of document it was. It doesn't matter if it's a screenshot or a procedure or work instruction. That doesn't matter. What matters is that they had everything related to a gearbox right here. So they're not constantly going back, opening up folders, constantly going back and forth doing that. And then there's a subcategory under gearbox because every gearbox has a shaft. And so there's some things related to a shaft. So this was organized so that they can build electronic order much faster, much quicker. Now they also had, of course, go through the process of defining shine and standardizing and sustaining. In the electronic world, you have to say, well, what does that mean? It's a little different than the manual world, the physical world, especially with regard to shine. People say, well, how do you shine documents? Well, the question is, how do you get them dirty? And so we did a little brainstorming, but you do see that there was a shine checklist. It says in the left-hand corner, it's my handwriting, it's hard to see, but there's a shine checklist that was created. And the frequency and responsibility for doing so. This was one of the checklists that was created. So you see that this is all related to electronic documents, and it's divided up by the 5 S's. So you have 3 questions that really define the shine criteria, or what is not dirty, and the standardization criteria. And this was used to sustain by leaders within the organization at a certain frequency. But you see questions like under sort, are there no duplicate documents or documents of previous revisions? Are there no extraneous documents? Under set in order, you have questions like, does the folder and file structure meet a standard that was developed? Number 6, do the file numbers match another standard? Under shine, is there appropriate number of documents? Not too many. Is there a shine schedule that's adhered to, and so forth and so on. So all of this still applies. You just have to use your thinking, your creative thinking, because it still applies. It's just a different shine is just not the way we usually think of in the physical world, but it's absolutely applicable in the digital world. So in this case study, they also developed leader standard work, which ensured that all the desktops, electronic files and folders met the standard. Of course, the standards were developed. They used a checklist similar to the one that I showed you for sustainment. They password protected certain electronic files. That's ensuring that things are sustained, right? So we have to use those tools as well. But then they also married the physical world and the electronic worlds, and it wasn't just the digital world, but they brought it out into the physical world too as well. But the primary focus for this particular case study was by far and away the digital world. So what I have here at the very end are just some other ideas and thoughts, some other best practices that I thought I would share with you because they're interesting, and it might ring a bell to you, and it might be something that you might want to think about as we're exploring how Digital 5S fits into our work lives. One organization with regard to emails. So this is the sort process regarding emails, so that we sort them almost immediately, and they abide by the 4 Ds. And the 4 Ds is do it if it can be done now in less than 2 minutes. Do it now. If someone's better suited, you go to delegate. If it's complicated and time consuming, maybe you designate this for someone else, or you put it into your task list almost immediately. And of course, if it's not necessary, you discard it. So that's kind of a best tool, best practice. And this particular company shared this internally. So it was a guideline to use internally so that people are better at managing emails. With regard to set and order best practices, there's different ways to organize documents. We have on the left-hand side by date. So these are numbers, but these numbers mean something and people know what they mean. So maybe organized by chronologically by date. That's a hard word to say, hierarchically, by using numbers where the category is placed in the most accessible position of the folder tree. This is actually ours. This is how we organize some of the files and folders that we use. And then of course alphabetically, like I showed you in the other example. So that's another best practice, but you have to kind of think what makes most sense to the people. How are they going to find the documents that they need? This was an example from a client that I work with, and this was the columns represent different people in their team, their process function, and beneath their columns are all the electronic organization and links to the documents that they use to do their job. So it's a very high-level leader standard work, not by schedule, but these are the documents that are applied to them specifically for each role. So that was a set and order best practice as well. Another organization on the left-hand side, you see they were converting all of their physical files and folders to electronic, but they have to, of course, keep all of the electronic files and folders, and they did not want to digitize them because it was a massive amount of work. So they have this this indexing system, this indexing system for storage, file storage. It's kind of a revolving, rotating conveyor system. And each one of these drawers, of course, has different folders in it. But these were all married up directly and synced with the electronic folders that they were using today. So they had to keep these. And you see some documents, some standards located on the shelf below there. That's showing the relationship between these files and folders to the electronic files and folders so that they understood. So they literally had a color scheme for their folders in the physical world. If you open up one of these drawers, so green meant this, blue meant this, and yellow meant this. In the digital world, since you can't color code yet the file names, they would actually put the file name with yellow, green, red, so that it matched up appropriately. And then on the right side, this is where people learn and train, and the PCs, the room containing the PCs, the entire room was well 5S, and it matched with the electronic world as well. So it looked really nice. Some other best practices from an oil company. These are email standards. This was a guideline that was given to all the people within a group within the oil company. They said all subject taglines, the subject line when you say this is what the subject is, they would have to either start off in capital letters with act, review, or info, so that people knew what they meant. So if you got something that says act, the two parties would need to take an action by a certain date, and then review, you had to read it and so forth, and information, it was low priority. They use additional practices, and they taught people about this, so there's consistency, using follow-up flags if you want to see reminders, setting the importance flag, either red or blue, so that the recipient can prioritize. And then there was guidelines on how to restrict use of reply all. A Swiss company, financial company, their best practice was to organize different tiers of importance. Critical information, such as stock trading, was tier 1. Other stuff, personal stuff, was tier 3. And obviously the accessibility to tier 1 was great. It was high. So they decided to break it out like that. Another company, an energy company, all their office documents, they decided to identify and classify it as confidential, classified, or informational. And any documents of lesser importance were automatically deleted after 90 days. So an automatic sort, if you will. So these are some of the best practices that we've seen that are kind of interesting, and maybe these are things that you can consider doing within your organization. Now, with regard to best in class, Kaizen Institute also has a best in class program, a 5S best in class program, where we certify organizations to this. I just recently did this right before. It was actually my last time that I worked on site at a company before COVID-19 occurred, and it was their best in class audit. Amazing work what they had done. But if you're interested, please contact us in which you want to step it up within your organization to become 5S best in class certified. It's very prestigious. Of course, you get a certificate, and it's very prestigious to say that you've been certified by the Kaizen Institute in best in class. Normally, the process is that you choose 2 production areas and 1 production related area. You choose 2 office areas, and then there's an audit done according to our specifications, and they're tough requirements. And the certificate is great, is used or is valid for an entire year. It really steps up the organization's performance, and it doesn't become just about the certificate. It really becomes about improvement, and it makes huge improvements. So please contact us if you have some interest in looking. Close here. We have another webinar this week on Thursday. The vision of zero defects is still alive, and next week we have Kaizen culture. And there's a series of other webinars that we are looking into, or I'm sorry, we're in the process of developing or scheduling. So most of these have been developed already. It's just a matter of scheduling and putting them into the rotation. If you have interest in specific topics, please let us know. And you should be getting information if you registered for this webinar on Thursday's webinar. You probably already received it, actually, and any subsequent webinars as well. As a quick reminder, please do, you will receive within 24 hours the link to YouTube. You'll receive a request to complete a survey on this webinar, and after that you'll receive a certificate too as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Chuck for any Q&A, but I thank you very much for participating. I really challenge you to look into this. This is a great opportunity to improve office productivity. Today, these are the things that we've brushed off for years because we're doing other things, but this is an opportunity to do it virtually and make some improvements, real improvements, make some production gains, and also keep alive the Kaizen spirit. So thank you very much. Chuck, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Mike. That was great. And thanks to our sponsor, Promega, for allowing this to happen today. We have over on our live event Q&A, perhaps some of you have got that up on your screen right now. We have presented a link to the survey for today's webinar. If you'd like to click on that link, you will be directed to a place where you can fill that in. And if you do fill in the survey, you will also receive a certificate of completion for the webinar. So you'll have that as well. If you have questions at this point in time, feel free to put them into the webinar chat, and we'll ask Mike for that. Mike, at this point in time, the question that came up while you were speaking was, is your book still available? Are you still in print? And actually, Daniel and Jesse were good enough to find them on Amazon and put the link into the chat as well.
Okay.
So also, if folks haven't gone over to the chat and you're interested in having a look at Mike's books, those links are over there as well.
Thank you.
We've also got a suggestion from somebody, thanks Hal, for a suggestion on how to color code folders. So that's over in the live event Q&A as well. So are there any questions out there that you'd like to have addressed right now? Please feel free to type them in there, and we'll ask Mike before we let him go. And we're going to have last call for questions. Are there any questions out there? Once again, thank you to our webinar sponsors, Promega, and thanks to Mike for putting together this webinar and leading us through it. With that, I'm going to call it our hour. As in the Kaizen way, we like to keep our time, start on time and finish on time. So thank you all for attending today. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Promega. And we'll see you again next time on the Kaizen webinars. Thanks, folks.
Take care.